And we're back with the Python Institute, this time lab number 3.1.4.13, basics of lists and the Beatles. Well, let's have some fun here. Let's see. Objective, create and modify simple lists and use methods to modify those lists. So we've already started working with some lists, and now we're going to continue working with those to have more experience. So the scenario, Beatles were one of the most popular music groups in the 1960s and best-selling band in history. Some people consider them to be the most influential act of the rock era. Indeed, they were included in Time magazine's compilation of the 20th century's 100 most influential people. Band underwent many lineup changes, culminating in 1962 with the lineup of John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Richard Starkey, better known as Ringo Starr. I'll show my ignorance right here and probably garner a lot of hatred by some people. I only ever knew that there were those four. So your goal here is to write a program to reflect these changes that lets you practice with the concept of lists. Your task is, step number 1, create an empty list named Beatles. Step 2, use the append method to add the following members: John Lennon, Paul McCartney, and George Harrison. Step 3, use a for loop and the append method to prompt the user for the following members of the band to add to the list. And then use the del instructions to remove Stu and Pete from the list. And then number 5, use the insert method to add Ringo Starr. So we're doing a bunch of different changes to this list, and we're pretty much doing every single one of them in a different format, which is great. It's a great option for us to be able to move things around here. By the way, are you a Beatles fan? I can handle some of it. All right, so step number 1, it says, so we have an example over here, and step number 1 says create an empty list named the Beatles. Looking at this print statement right here, I know if I just run this, it's going to give me an error because it's going to say, oh, Beatles doesn't exist. I don't know what the Beatles is. So when it says create the empty list named Beatles, I'm going to assume it means before this print line. So I'll come up here and I'm just going to create an empty list. So we'll start off by creating just the variable called Beatles. And how do I specify that this is a list? Well, that's with these square brackets. Just putting empty square brackets there will create an empty list. In fact, if I run this right now, it should just print out step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5, and then the fab. Or maybe nothing at all. There we go. So it prints out the empty list right next to them. Okay, step number 2, use the append method to add the following members. So again, I'm going to assume that it wants this right before the print statement. The append method, well, basically we come up with the Beatles dot append. So the Beatles is the object, and then append is a property or a method of the Beatles. And so I want to append to the Beatles list. And this time I use parentheses, because it's a method of the list. It's not the list that uses square brackets. It is a method of the list which uses parentheses. And then I go ahead and I type in, see, I use double quotes here, John Lennon. And very briefly, just to see that work, I'll go ahead and run that before I do a second append. And we can see John Lennon is listed as the only Beatle in all of this. Well, in order to add the other people, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to copy and paste this line a couple of times, and I'm going to change the name. And George Harrison. All right. And now when I run it, we should see all 3 of those names listed with nice commas separating them out. All right, so that's option number 2, using the append method. Just note that you have to do this one Beatle at a time. Yeah. And then, again, the fact that we're using parentheses as opposed to the square brackets. All right, step number 3, use a for loop and the append method to prompt the user to add the following members. So that means we need to use both a for loop and we need to prompt the end user. There's a couple of different ways you can do this, depending on how you read it. In fact, we could use the for loop to be able to say, hey, go ahead and type in the name. So that's one option as far as how you read this prompting the user. You could prompt them to say, hey, go ahead and type in the name, and then the end user has to type in Stu, or the user has to type in Pete. Or we could put in a, do you want to add? Prompt that would already have the users in there, and then you just say yes, yes. I'm thinking the way this is written, it wants us to prompt the end users to type in their names. First time I read it, I thought it was the second method down here of saying, hey, do you want to do this? And then you say yes. But I'm thinking it's probably the former that they want. So that means, so we need to do a for loop, and let's just say for member in, and then I'm just going to do the range operation. That's going to count from 0, and then 1, and then 2, it exits out. So basically it's going to do this twice. It's going to assign the number to member, which isn't really going to be used at all. But so then what we do is we just prompt the user. Let's see, so name, let's see, new name, Beetle name. Yeah, let's call it Beetle name equals, and then we'll just prompt the user. So input and new Beetle name. So it's going to prompt the user for the new Beetle name, assign it to a variable, and then I'll go ahead and use the append method, exactly like what we did before. .append, and I will add in the Beetle name. And so since the range is 2, it will do that automatically twice. And so it will prompt for 2 users and then continue on. And actually, let's try that. I won't even worry about the names. I'll just type in a couple of random names here, and then we'll see that yes, in fact, they did get appended. All right. Step number 4, use the del instruction to remove Stu and Pete from the list. Stu and Pete were those 2 names I just added in. So I need to use the del option. So del, Beatles, it's 2 options right here. So I have 5 items. We have object number 0, location number 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I could del Beatles 4 and then del Beatles 3. So that would get rid of this last one, and then it would get rid of that one. Alternatively, I could actually make this a little bit easier, and I could del Beatles 3, del Beatles 3. And so that would get rid of the third one. This last, that would get rid of this one, and then this guy would slide in over and take its place. And so then when I delete it the second time, it would take care of that again. What I could also do, I could just say -1, -1. That gets rid of the last item on the list each time. And that would work as well. In fact, let's go ahead and try that. And then we'll see, yes, it went ahead and it did remove the 2 of them there. However, there is a different way I can do this. I can actually define this as a range, and I can do this on one line. So I could actually do a range of 3 to 5. Remember, 0, 1, 2, and 3 and 4 were the last 2. So if I do a range of 3 to 5, then that should delete the last 2. And let's check it out. And no, it's freezing on me again. And it wrote them up there, and then we went ahead and we deleted it. We deleted the range. So all of those options work. It really comes down to which one you prefer. This one right here is probably the most elegant because it does in one line, which could take multiple lines. However, it's not always the most obvious as far as how to actually do it. All right, so that was step number 4. Step number 5, use the insert method to add Ringo Starr. So now we get to do a new command using insert. And specifically, we want to do this because we want to add it to the beginning of the list. So far, when we've been using append always adds to the end of the list. Using insert, we can insert these numbers or values into anywhere in the list, either the beginning, the end, or somewhere in the middle. And so, well, let's try it out. So Beatles dot insert, and parentheses. The first parameter that the insert method takes is the location. Where do we want to put this in here? And it takes it as a number. Since everything starts counting at 0, we want to put this at the beginning of the list. The location itself would be 0. And then we go ahead and we type Ringo Starr. And so now if we run it, so I'm going to copy this. I'm going to run it up here since this is a little bit larger and a little bit more reliable for me anyway. Okay, so now I'm going to have to come back here, Stu Sutcliffe and Pete Best. So we see that it went ahead and added Stu and Pete to the list. It then removed them from the list, and then it put Ringo right at the beginning. Now, if we didn't want Ringo at the beginning, maybe we wanted John Lennon, then Ringo Starr. What we would do is we would just change the location of the insert command. Not Ringo, excuse me. Pete Best. And since we told it location number 1, it skipped over John Lennon, which was in location number 0, and then added Ringo Starr and pushed Paul McCartney out. So there you go. Lots of fun with lists. Let's see, working with first off, creation of a list, appending to the list, more appending, deleting from the list, and inserting from the list, and then lastly, writing out how many people there were total.